Alright, so notes this week look like it's a lot for today, but the good news is we'll do this page and we will only just start this one and we will continue it later on this week. So I'm going to go ahead and start cutting this one. I'm going to turn it into two little flaps. And just so that we make sure we understand what it is we're talking about. So over the past few weeks, maybe going into over a month, we were talking about the American Revolution, and then we learned how the colonists won that war. Well, now that they're an independent country, they've got to set up a government, and that's what we started talking about last week. Why do we have government? What is government? And today we are going to start talking about that document called the Constitution. And the Constitution is not to be confused with the Declaration of Independence. They're both documents, but the Declaration of Independence is when the colonists basically wrote a letter to Great Britain saying, we are no longer going to be your colonies. We are going to be our own independent country, hence Declaration of Independence. The Constitution, in contrast, is a document once the war was over to set up the new government of the United States. Alright, so I made each of these a flap, and each of these a flap. I'm going to go ahead and paste it. Alright, we'll start with the Bill of Rights. And we'll do the First, Second, and Third Amendments today. There are more amendments than that, but we're going to focus on the first 10 over the next few weeks. So we're going to do a little at a time. Alright, that didn't work out the way I wanted, but that's okay. Alright, I'll worry about cutting this guy a little bit later. So let's go ahead and start rolling with the Bill of Rights and the first 3 amendments to the Constitution. Alright, so let's start with this one. The Bill of Rights. What is it? Lift it up. The Bill of Rights are the first 10 amendments to the Constitution. So the first 10 amendments get a fancy name. They're called the Bill of Rights. First 10 amendments to the Constitution are called the Bill of Rights. I am not having good luck here with my foldables. Who wrote them? One of our founders wrote them, and that was James Madison, and he ended up being our 4th president. Let's put that on there. How were they approved? The states, those 13 colonies that were now states, approved them. They had to agree and approve them. What document influenced the Bill of Rights? So what do they look to? What do they look back on to give them ideas for what these 10 amendments would be like? And they look to the Virginia Declaration of Rights. Alright, so key takeaways from this. The Bill of Rights are the first 10 amendments to the Constitution, written by what ended up being our 4th president, James Madison. And it was up to the 13 states, what were the 13 colonies, to approve of these, to make them official. We're going to continue this with the first 3 of those 10. These are the big 3. All right. On the front side of the flap, what is the First Amendment. The First Amendment is the right to freedom of speech. This was a revolutionary idea. At that time in the 1700s, it was unheard of for regular people to be able to criticize their government, to speak openly in criticism of the government and get away with it. You have to remember that at that time, most places were ruled by an absolute ruler, somebody with total and complete control. This is very similar to what we're seeing in A Night Divided, right? Gerda does not have the freedom of speech. She cannot criticize her government. And the United States, when it set up its government and the Constitution, it wanted to make sure the people had that right to be able to express how they feel without the fear of getting arrested or prosecuted by the government for that. This also includes a freedom of religion. Remember that Great Britain, the official religion was the Church of England, and a lot of the reason the early colonists left Great Britain for the colonies was so that they could practice their religion. And so when we set up our Constitution, we wanted to keep that tradition going, that people had the right to practice their religion. This also includes freedom of the press. Newspapers would have been the really big instrument of the press back then, but today that would include like the news and other forms of media. Freedom of assembly. This is so that people could get together. They didn't need permission to get together and talk about things especially related to the government. Just imagine Goethe being able to get together with people and talk about the problems that she had with her government. Now, it was not allowed, but the United States wanted to make sure that that be permitted. Freedom of petition. Petition, I believe, was a vocabulary word this year. That's when you take issue with something or you want something to happen, and so you go out and try to get signatures for people that agree with you to try to make some sort of change. Let's see. Under the flap, we're going to include some ideas that I haven't mentioned yet that relate to these 5 freedoms associated with this right. They wanted us to write that press means news media. We got that. Assembly means to meet in a group. The government cannot pass a national religion. People can write to their representatives, but we're going to put under here, this is protecting the basic rights of all citizens. Basically, the freedom to be yourself, to think whatever it is you think, and it's okay. While you're still writing that, I want to move to the Second Amendment. The Second Amendment, you can see there that it is just one thing that we're focused on instead of 5 like the previous one. This is to keep and bear arms. A lot of you hunters might really appreciate this. Underneath the flap, we're going to write 2 things. If you need to pause it, go ahead. I just want to get through this because it's Friday afternoon and I've got a gazillion things to do this evening. 2 big things we're going to write under here. This is the government may pass laws to control but not prevent firearms. So you have the right to protect your home, your property, and go hunting with those types of firearms. This also called for the individual states, which at the time were 13 of them, those 13 original colonies, can have their own militia, so their own little organization of people that would basically eventually become the military. At the time it was militia. States may have their own militias. You can even see military militia. There is definitely a correlation between the two because they're spelled very similarly. The Third Amendment. This one seems odd to us today, but we read something recently, probably in the last 9 weeks, that provides context for this. The Third Amendment is the right to not house soldiers. Remember, we had a common assessment for standard RI 5.6. You probably don't remember that part, but it was talking about a law that was passed, the Quartering Act, that Great Britain passed, that a lot of colonists had a problem with, that basically if a British military person needed your house for whatever reason, they could come into your house, use your stuff, eat your food, all that stuff, and you had to let them. I mean, you couldn't tell them no. This amendment was a response to that. And that is, the government cannot force us to keep soldiers and provide for them in our homes. That just seems like common sense, but the fact that it had to be put out there shows that this was happening at the time, and the United States wanted to set it up in their Constitution that this would not happen to citizens in the United States of America. All right, I'll give you a few more minutes to write those. I'm going to start copying this one, and we're already at 12 minutes here, so I am not going to get very far on this, so you can breathe a sigh of relief. I don't know why that has a backside. Okay, let me pause this. All right, I'm back with a functional paper. So I'm going to cut out the big bubble that says legislative, executive, and judicial, and I am quite certain you have heard these before. I know you should have been taught this in 3rd grade. So a lot of this is going to be review. The United States has 3 branches of government. You are definitely aware of that. What you might not be aware of, and this might relate to potential future questions, so make sure you're listening to me, not tuning me out, is that a man by the name of Montesquieu, a Frenchman, who lived during this time period, came up with this idea. The idea that if you want to prevent power from being in the hands of just one person or one small group of people, you got to spread that power out. You got to have multiple areas where this power is being held by different sets of people. And in that way, you can minimize the risk of the power getting in one person's hands and then being corrupted. All right. Let me pause it again. How many times am I going to pause it? I don't know. So maybe in the future, I might ask a question like, the man who came up with the concept of branches of government came from which country? Incidentally, it's the same country as our first friend. It's not the question for today, however, so don't get excited. Start writing France all over the construction paper. Alright, so I'm getting ready to paste down these 3 branches of government, and once again, I did a terrible job because it's crooked. Move this guy out of here. Alright, so we have the 3 branches of government. I feel like I am in a whirlwind going super fast, giving you guys a lot of information, and I'm sorry for that. Alright, we have legislative, executive, and judicial. You have definitely heard of these 3 things. Let's see here. We are not going to go far. I think we are going to stop right here today. Okay, so we're just going to fill out the first 2 rows for each column. And I like to move from this one to this one to this one and then back again, so that way you can kind of compare and contrast in your head as we're doing this. All right, the legislative branch. What makes up the legislative branch? That is our Congress. And that consists of our Senate and House of Representatives. Keep in mind that these 3 branches not only exist at the national government level, so like we have a National Congress in Washington, D.C., and we have a Senate and a House of Representatives there. This also applies to North Carolina. You go up to Raleigh, we have a legislature there. We don't call them Senate and House of Representatives, but we have one at the state level and we have one at the national level. The one at the state level is making laws for the state of North Carolina, while the one at the national level is making laws for the entire country. And its main power, like I just said, is it's making, I have no idea why there's this random cross or T. I think it's a T. Oh, because it got cut off, I see. Making the nation's laws. But remember, we have a legislative branch at our state level who's making our state laws too. That might be a question for later too. Who knows? I'm just coming up with this. All right, the executive branch. This at the national level in Washington, D.C. would be our president and his or her, maybe someday her, cabinet. So basically his advisors, people that he meets with and keeps him informed of all these different things. Because if you think about it, the president is overseeing the whole country. And he has advisors who help him with military decisions. And he has advisors that help him with economic decisions. And he has advisors that help him with transportation decisions. So these little experts that he talks to would be his cabinet. So the executive includes him and the people who help him make decisions. And at the state level, we have a governor who is in the executive branch. And he too has advisors that help him make decisions for the state. All right, judicial branch. This is at the national level would be the Supreme Court and some lower courts. The judicial branch in Washington, D.C., the Supreme Court and its associated lower courts, of course, are worried about the entire nation, while we have state courts that focus just on the state of North Carolina. So we have a judicial branch for North Carolina, as well as a judicial branch that's up in D.C. And I skipped the part right here. The president and his cabinet, their job, their main power is carrying out the laws that are made by these guys. See, the power is shared here. You don't have one person making the laws and enforcing the laws. You have this group of people over here making the laws and they can't enforce it. And then this branch that's enforcing it. So they have to work together. It's not just with one person or one small group of people. That helps keep freedom free. Freedom, I should say. All right. The judicial branch, still working with these laws here. They're making it. They're enforcing it. These guys over here are interpreting laws and settling conflicts. So, for example, if these guys come up with a law that violates this Constitution we're working on over here, And they're like, yeah, okay, we're going to enforce this law. And then they go, this violates the Constitution. You can't have this law. And they strike it out, and it's no longer a law. So you got 3 separate groups that are constantly supervising each other to make sure that they don't abuse their power. And that's what the beauty is of Montesquieu's idea of 3 branches. Remember where Montesquieu was from. There is no question today, guys. We're already at 20 minutes and 28 seconds, and I probably have already asked us to switch groups. So I'm probably going to end up making this where I'm, unfortunately, using up your downtime and study hall time to finish what we've done today. But we are stopping here for the time being. Make sure your name is on this. You should have been given 1 piece of construction paper, and I had to use 2 because I was already using one I used before. But there's definitely enough construction paper for front and back. All right, get those in the basket, name on it. Even if you didn't finish, I will stamp it with the study hall stamp, and you will have an opportunity to finish.